Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In this episode, we're going to get a few things done. It's sort of a random collection of stuff that needs to happen while I'm working on the car. So here I'd temporarily put the engine and transmission in the car, and now I'm taking it out. So you can see how I do it. It's not as elegant as you'd imagine. Really, there's some... Well, anyways, it's pretty sketchy, so let's not do this at home, people. See, that wasn't so bad. The engine's not even all that heavy when there's no internals in it. Oh, heave it on there and away we go. Just to get the floor swept up, we're going to do a bunch of rolling around on it. So just in case you thought I had a crew of people that came in to tidy up after me. There's the big I-beam going back in. Gives me the clearance to get the engine out. And the nose cone's coming off because the frame rails have to go up there. So, out comes the sawsall. Be brave for about 2 minutes, and they're gone. There's the last little piece of that front frame cut off. Gone for good. Alright, rails going in, just a quick test fit. It's about where I start figuring out that it won't quite go up right, but knock the front suspension in and be happy. Okay, there you can see that the rails have gone up underneath the car, and suspension's, well, it's not in, right, because the back part of that lower control arm there still has to go up, and this of course is just a test. It's not really a thing yet. These aren't anywhere close to being in the right location. In fact, I've got a lot of measurements to do to find the right location. And the other thing is, it's a little bit, currently it's a little bit like this in the frame, right? So the whole thing is kind of canted over. So that's why we've got the other jig table in order to set this thing up. So we're going to take it all out, break it apart, and we're going to add some cross members to the frame, just temporary ones. We're just tacking them in to hold the square, and then we'll put the whole thing back up underneath the car and start the measuring and cutting and other things that need to be done in order to get it in. So super happy at this point. In fact, the only real issue that I'm having, as you saw me there on the stop motion, is you can see here just a little bit, this upright here has pulled in just a hair. So that means that bushing holder is tilted in just a bit. That's remember that part of that problem I was talking about when I welded stuff? Well, you can see here, see if I get you a little closer. Of course, the heat affected zone's all on the one side, right? The heat affected zone's all here. So that's going to cause it, when it cools, to tilt, and of course it did. So I'm going to have to take these and bend them back just a bit. I'd like to try to get it as close as I can. I mean, when I go to do the final install, I can always throw my jack between those 2 points and spread it apart and get it right. But I'd sort of like not to have to do that. If I can bend it beforehand, I will. And at this stage, still pretty easy to do. Part of my brain still thinks, well, maybe I should have welded all this in, just tacked it up and then welded it all in as a part. That probably would have been a better idea, but hindsight, never done it before. So anyway, there we go. Category of rather be lucky than good again, right? We can only be so good. Anyway, remember last time I showed you this doesn't work? Well, I just finished doing the stretch here and managed to get everything actually, well, the arm fits in nicely, and this distance didn't change, right? The distance this way. I was quite surprised about that. But anyway, here we go. And this now, even one-handed, it's still, a hair tight, but it's hard to do one-handed, folks. But it fits. it fits all the way through, right? Couldn't do that the other day, so that's good enough for this. Okay, let's get the, what we're going to do here is take the, I got some 2x3 that's really far too scabby for anything reasonable. We're going to tack that across the front, and I had some 1.5" tube over here. We're going to tack that across the back. That's going to hold all this square and then back up under the car. Okay, welcome to the corner of the shop. Today we're going to have a quick look at how we're going to create the jig in order to get the front frame clip centered underneath the car off the rails. It was something I spent quite a bit of time working on, just trying to figure out what was right. Again, I should have taken some better reference measurements when I first cut the car apart. So I found myself in that unenviable position of being a little bit loose on the measurement and not quite as tight as I should be. But hey, we're all learning. So I figured out a way to work out where middle is without losing my mind. And that was basically use the jig that I made. I mean, I made the jig. You'd think I would have remembered to use it. But when I was busy checking everything with plumb bobs and making sure everything was where it was, I found that my table, I mean, I did set the table up a couple of years ago. It had moved just a little bit relative to the car. So, long story short, I kicked it, and it's now in the right place. I hate to admit it. Well, not really. It sounds kind of brutal, but I just gave it a boot. It was only out about 1/8 of an inch, but I couldn't have the frame out. I mean, you've already seen me lose my mind over smaller measurements than that. So what we'll do today is we're going to have a look at it. So we've got the frame sitting underneath the car right now, so we know it fits roughly. Just showing you that in the video, and we'll just take a look at two different brackets that we're going to build that will bolt down to the table that will establish that frame into the center of the car, and then it's going to stay there for a little while we finish building the suspension onto it. I mean, we'll be going between the frame jig on the table and the frame jig under the car, and we're just going to move between one and the other wherever the process leads us. So, but it's good if they're both very similar in terms of how they're built. So we'll be referencing the inside of the frame rails in all instances, because that's how I did it on the table. So we'll reference insides, and we're going to bolt these things down. So I'm just going to quickly show you what it is we're going to do. And then we're over in the corner of the shop where I keep all the measurement tools. So I've got a surface plate here, so it's a nice granite block. This one we got at Busy Bee Tools or something for $50. And it's lovely. It's a grade B, so it's a shop grade. Which means it's only good to, well, things I can't even measure. So, but these are super handy to measure stuff with, and then I've been on eBay again buying more tools that I don't really need. So I'm just going to show you on a piece of paper what we're going to do. So quarters get a little cramped here, but on the paper, what we've got is the table on the bottom. So we've got our rails, and we're if I draw it a little bit scaled, we're made everything out of 2x3, 24 inches here, inside to inside. And as these are 2 inches, that means we're going to be 28 inches outside to outside. Okay, so that's our basic dimension. The inside to inside of the frame is 25 inches. And I cut the material 32 inches. Right? Because on the edge of the frame, I've got some 2-inch material tacked on here. Right? And that's where the bolts go. So I've got a bolt there. We'll have bolts through here. You've already seen me cut the brackets for these. So that would give me 32 inches from edge to edge if I was to go right to that far outside edge, which is sort of where I want to go. Now, in order to work that out, of course, I'm going to go up to the top here. So that's going to be my 32-inch piece. I need to establish a really good center line on this, so that's going to be at 16 inches. Right? Because I'm going to end up using this center line for just about everything else, so I might as well get a really good reference on it, so I'm going to scribe it. So I'm going to put a nice sharp scribe mark on the piece of metal and make sure I'm right in the middle. So if we go 32 minus 25 leaves us with 7 inches, so if we negate those, that's 7 inches. If half of that is going to be my either side, in order to get this inside to inside dimension right, that's going to leave me with 3.5 inches out here. So I need to put a bar at 3.5, a bar at 3.5. The 2 can go this way, of course. So then we're going to end up with, conceptually, sort of a set of goalposts, right? And then on those goalposts, I'm going to put another piece of angle iron here as a shelf on the front side ones, and on the back side ones, I'm going to have these pieces. Sorry, I'm going to reference these the other way, right? Jeez, holy cow, I'm making mistakes already. I haven't even built it yet. We're referencing the inside, so this is going to be 25. Not this. That'll be 4 inches less, so 21 inches. Anyway, so we'll put our scribe lines on, and we'll get our plates welded onto these, right? And then we'll be able to bolt them on, and everything should be nice and square, and we should have a good center. Okay, so how are we going to accomplish that? Well, we're going to shift over here. Well, forgive me if I don't tape a lot of this stuff while it's super cold. The batteries in the camera don't last very long when it's 22 below zero or whatever it is today. It's awfully darn cold. Okay, so you can see here I've got my tube, so that's just 2-inch tube. I've got it mounted with a magnet, and that's sitting square now on my granite plate, which is perfectly flat. I then have a height gauge, and it's got a scribe end on it, and I purchased it on eBay. And it's a lovely piece. It's a Brown and Sharp. I think I paid $70 for it. It's a ridiculous amount of money to pay for this stuff. It's so cheap. Anyways, with this, I can, with the vernier scale on it, which is over here, I can do very fine adjustments. You know, I can thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to put all the measurements on this, but of course, it only goes up to 21 inches. So I'm going to make it all perfect on one side. I'll put that last measurement on the top with one of my finer scales, just to make sure everything's okay there. I don't actually have anything that'll measure. Well, maybe I do have a 32-inch ruler. I do actually, so I'll use that. At any rate, just wanted to show that piece of equipment. It's super handy to do this kind of work with. If you've spent any time in a machine shop, there's probably one of these plates in a tool room, and it's probably much bigger than this and a whole lot more expensive than this one was. But for guys in their shop, it seems like a thing that'll just sit in the corner and collect dust, but I found for laying out parts when I need to do that kind of thing, which is reasonably often, it's a real time saver, because it just takes a few seconds to set something up so that it's absolutely perfect. And I also use parallels fairly commonly to do that, but it would be an incredible stack of parallels to get me all the way to the top of that bar. And using a tape measure for this kind of stuff is fine, but I really do want that 16 inch. I do not want that done with a tape measure. I don't want parallax error. I don't want to doubt myself. I know the Brown & Sharps is perfectly perpendicular to this surface, so I can run it up to 16 inches, I can scribe that line, and I know where that thing's got to be. And then I can come, back down the distance I need. I can make my 3.5 inch scribe off the bottom. That's going to get me 25 inches, of course, between the ends. So let's just do a couple of those. I guess I'll do the 3.5 inch first, and then I'll go up and do the 16. And I'll do both bars as I do them. So I'm going to set it to 3.5, set one bar up, and then set the other. I got 2 of these rails to build. So again, when you're doing multiples of these things, it makes it a lot faster to do that. So there's really nothing using one. This has got a very nice scale on it actually. So I need 3.5 inches. So 3 inch 50, and then 0. I have 50 gradations here. Each one of those corresponds to thousandths of an inch. If I want to use the fine adjust, I just lock here. I do not lock this knob, and then I can very carefully adjust that line. So that it's right on where I need it to be. It's right on there somewhere. That's close enough for government work anyway. Actually, let's just... There's 50 gradations on the scale. Zoom in, you'll never be able to see it, but I'm going to try. Gradations on that scale, and there's only one position where each one of those gradations actually lines up. So you have 1/1000th of an inch resolution in this particular tool. So that's a little bit better than a ruler. I don't trust my eyes as much anymore. Actually, I never really trusted my eyes. Had bad sight my entire life. Always good to decide to do these kinds of things when you can't see for beans, but at any rate, we'll measure these up and we'll knock them out pretty quick. So then all we're going to do with this, come over, we're going to pray that the dicom that I put on it is at the right height, and it's just barely there. If I just swing that back and forth, there's my 3.5 inch done. Nothing to it. Now theoretically I can flip that bar around and do 3.5 inches on the other side, but in machining worlds we would never do that. That's considered bad practice, or at least it sure would be the way I was taught. Always just reference one side. Don't reference two sides. Referencing two sides gives you double the error. Referencing one side splits it. So you just want to reference the one side. So if we're going to make a measurement, we're just going to make a measurement with reference to this side. So we're going to measure our 3.5, our 16, and we're going to get that final measurement put in here, and we're going to do it all referencing just the one side, so that all our error stays in one plane. Okay, so another 3.5. Just line it up. Put a guard on it. It's because I'm scared of it. And we're just going to whip it up to 16. So this is a super important measurement. This thing is very tight. That's better. Again, it's a precision tool, right? So it doesn't move just because you want it to move. Let's get serious. Okay, so again, we're going to lock the outside of that. We're going to allow the fine adjustment knob to, of course, move us in the wrong direction. That was what was broken, right? Was the fine adjust, as always. So. Thankfully, it was an American-made tool, so being able to get the screw is only a number 440, so it was like zero big deal to get it. Okay, there's 16 inches exactly. This one again just does to 21. It's a pretty big tool actually. So we're going to scribe that in, and that is going to become, if I can hold it steady, permanent mark for the center of that car. So I built these massive triangles in order to ensure that everything is square, and they're dead square. Very heavy, but boy do they ever work. This is the first use of them right here. I had to make sure that it wasn't just 25 inches at the bottom of that frame, but it had to be 25 inches at the top of the frame. So it has to be perfectly square. Most welding people will know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I just sprayed them with anti-spatter there, but it's so cold in the garage it wouldn't even dry off. Anyway, there it is. So that's the shorter of the two. The one we're just going to use as goal posts, so it's just tacked up. They're turning out well. Here's the brackets that will bolt it all down to the frame. I am reminded that this is about 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't got those things tacked into the frame yet. I suspect that'll happen this weekend. Anyways, there's the parts there to hold the front of the frame up at a precise height. Setting that with that the long blade on the combination square. And last but not least, we're gonna just just showing you that center line scribed all the way around. Yeah, we'll just tack those on, and then that's another job done. So many little jigs just to do this. Oh yeah, I found out that that angle's not square. So yeah, frustrated. If I would have tacked it in there, it never would have gone on. So then I have to tilt everything up just a little bit so it's square. Once it's square, it's okay. Just check everything, folks. Okay, that's a wrap for this video. Just as I get the last little pieces here knocked in, we'll be back with a few more pieces going together in the next episode.